Arken Age feels like a physics playground with an entire game built around it. It's one of the best AA VR games I've ever played, and at moments it comes tantalizingly close to being a true AAA VR experience. It's the result of passion, skill, and extensive playtesting that values feedback, and it's about as polished and smooth as a game can get. Arken Age deserves to stand alongside titles like Behemoth, Vertigo 2, Arizona Sunshine, Metro Awakening, and more. Stick around until the very end of the video for my thoughts on why this is such a remarkable achievement. If you're new here, I do information-heavy reviews while not spoiling anything. And if that's your thing, consider subscribing. Arken Age releases on January 16th for PSVR 2 and Steam VR, and it's developed by Vitruvius VR. It's a single-player story-driven adventure game that took me around 14 hours to beat. For completionists, you're looking at probably closer to 16 to 17 hours here. And after finishing, you'll unlock a New Game Plus mode, but more on that a little later. The game is polished, optimized, and absolutely ready for release, and let me tell you, it feels damn good to say that. And while I primarily reviewed the PCVR version, I also spent an extensive amount of time with the PSVR 2 build. It runs wonderfully on both and looks incredible on both. And I'm going to list off the PSVR 2's features on screen now. And this is the development mentality that the PSVR 2 deserves. More games need the Arken Age treatment. And it's also just overflowing with every VR option you could dream of. Comfort options, gun angles, and more. If there's a setting, it's probably in there. Visually, Arken Age is breathtaking. The lush environments immediately captivate you, with each level feeling meticulously handcrafted, a true work of art. The strong environmental storytelling adds to the sense of immersion, making the entire experience feel so much more alive. This is a true high-fidelity experience, and I don't think it's ever going to come to the Quest. That would require probably too much serious trimming of these trees, and nobody wants to see that. Up close, you'll notice some low-res textures here and there, and while they are noticeable, they didn't detract from the experience for me. But everything else looks great. Most biomes in the game maintain a cohesive theme and feel, but the tone shifts noticeably in the later stages. And it's a gorgeous game from start to finish with some truly breathtaking moments. Arken Age is incredibly well optimized. It's seriously impressive. I encountered maybe one frame hitch the entire time I played, both on PCVR and PSVR 2. In the game, you play as the Untethered One, a lizard-like creature on a quest to uncover what happened to the Grand Arborist, a godlike figure in this world who mysteriously has gone silent. Meanwhile, the world is being harvested for Arcanite, a resource being corrupted by Hyperion, a robotic machine race. I won't dive too much deeper into the story here, but this is what you need to know. The narrative mostly unfolds through voiceovers you hear in your head, with occasional scripted sequences. If you're curious about the backstory, you can hunt for hidden audio files scattered throughout, which it does add a layer to the lore. Additionally, the environment itself tells its own story, and it's quite wonderful at doing that.
Welcome to the Gilded Kingdom, home to the second age of the Nara race. Only 3 Nara remain since the day of Hyperion.
The story provides context and a sense of purpose for your actions, but it rarely takes center stage here. There are only a handful of characters you meet along the way, and while they're interesting, you likely won't form a deep connection with them. That said, the world building hints at a rich lore beneath the surface, and if you enjoy unraveling a game's universe, there's plenty here to fuel fan theories and deeper exploration. The narrative does pick up in the latter half of the game, delivering a satisfying conclusion while leaving room for a potential sequel. Okay, let's talk gameplay. Arken Age is a physics-driven action-adventure game that relies heavily on both melee combat and shooting. There are some puzzle elements sprinkled in to break up the action. You have 3 primary weapons, kind of. They all run off of these energy cores here. On your hip is your melee weapon, and on your other hip is your sidearm, and it starts off as a pistol. And over your shoulder is the big gun. It starts off as a shotgun. But here's where it gets fun. Arken Age features a crafting system with weapon blueprints that can completely transform these weapons, and I absolutely enjoyed this system. Weapons have multiple attachment points, and you'll find schematics hidden throughout the game world or even available for purchase in the store. I won't spoil all the weapon designs, but trust me, they're wildly creative and a blast to use. For example, early on I found a schematic that turned my sword into an axe, and not just any axe, but one that decouples and turns into a throwing axe. My pistol evolved into an SMG, and my shotgun became a beam weapon that just knocks these robots on their asses. Changing the business end of the weapon is what really transforms it into something different. You can also mix and match weapon parts to your heart's desire, but assembling a full matching set unlocks powerful bonuses. The set bonuses aren't just standard damage boost or fire rate increases either. Some provide creative perks. Take the crossbow, for instance. With the full matching set, the bolts gain a delayed explosion. This level of thought and creativity is what makes Arken Age's crafting system so satisfying, and it really motivated me to find every one of these weapon blueprints. Outside of the traditional weapons, there are a few grenades, portable mines, and your trusty shield capable of reflecting fire. Throwing grenades is very doable in this game. In fact, they kind of seek their target, rarely missing. Some may find this a bit heavy-handed, but personally, I enjoyed it. Some weapons are more useful than others. I certainly found ones that were my favorite, and I think you will too. One standout feature is Arken Age's remarkable full-body IK system. If you're groaning at the mention of full-body IK, don't. It works beautifully here. It's smooth, intuitive, and never feels awkward or gets in the way. This isn't that janky bonework style IK where your thumb or arm gets stuck and you struggle to just navigate the game world. Instead, it adds to the immersion in a way that feels natural. Honestly, this might be the best full-body IK system in a VR game not named Batman. And any physics-driven VR game should strive to feel as polished as Arken Age. When a game nails its physics, it constantly surprises you, from unexpected grenades sending enemies flying to the small details that just make the world feel alive. And rarely have I encountered VR melee combat that feels this good. The weapons are light and futuristic, yet they pack a serious punch. They strike a perfect balance. Not weightless, but also not sluggish or inaccurate. There's no awkward stamina mechanics stopping you from swinging, or any clumsy two-handed swords or axes here. And since this is a physics-driven game, you can do stuff like sweep out an enemy's legs from underneath them and then drive it home. Every swing feels impactful, even when it just glances off armor. It seems like the best way to kill an enemy is to break a section of armor and then deliver the killing blow. Chop away at the helmet so you can behead. In the first few hours of the game, I relied heavily on melee combat. It felt like the best way to shatter enemy armor, but by the end I was dual-wielding melee weapons and guns, using firearms to break through that armor before finishing enemies off with a club to the head. At the start of the game, the guns feel weak and almost not worth using. They run out of ammo kind of fast and require frequent reloading. But that changes quickly as you unlock and discover new weapon schematics and parts. Before long, I found myself using a healthy mix of all weapons available, because the Arken Age never truly feels like a first-person shooter or a melee game. It's a balanced combination of both, and to succeed, you'll likely need to master using both styles in tandem. Depending on how much armor an enemy has, they can feel a little spongy. For the most part, this isn't a game where you take down a bad guy in 1 or 2 shots, especially once you get past the first few levels. But the beauty in Arken Age lies in the freedom it gives you, whether it be swords, shields, guns, or explosives. You can choose any combination you want. This flexibility is thanks to the game's physics-driven design, where weapons are fully interactive objects. Good physics in a VR game make a huge difference, and the key word being good, and Arken Age's physics system is excellent. Take the rifle, for example. Reloading involves pulling a lever to lock the energy core in place. But because the weapon is a fully physics-driven object, I discovered I could slam the bottom of the rifle against the wall to lock the energy core in, which was damn immersive. Moments like these are what make Arken Age's combat just so satisfying and set it apart. Maybe you'll block and parry with a shield, or you'll toss a grenade to knock enemies off their feet so you can finish them off later. If you've played this game already, let me know your favorite methods of delivering that killing blow, because it feels like it's only limited to your imagination. And that's the truly great part of physics done right. And as I just mentioned, Arken Age features a solid blocking and parrying system. It's accurate and functional, but never feels overpowered, especially given how unpredictable the enemies can be. And trust me, they killed me a lot. Enemies switch between melee and ranged combat when you least expect it, often attacking from angles you didn't anticipate. They'll run for cover, heal, entangle you in vines, lunge at you from a distance, and a whole lot more. The AI strikes kind of an odd balance. On one hand, it's dynamic and impressive with a variety of moves and abilities, and on the other hand, at times it feels a little brain dead. I've seen enemies do things like repeatedly jump up and down the same cliff.
I thought I saw something.
There's also moments when you can walk right up to them without really being noticed. At times they feel both blind and deaf. The AI's use of abilities can at times feel random. Sometimes enemies will heal the moment they take damage, or they'll trap you but fail to capitalize on that opportunity. It's not perfect, but even with these quirks, the combat remains fun. Killing and dismembering enemies in brutal ways just never got old, and despite the AI flaws, I found the combat engaging to the very end, with enemies keeping me on my toes. They are truly both impressive and kind of stupid at the same time, but always satisfying. In the later stages, you'll face bigger, angrier robots, and a few boss fights add variety to mix things up. These battles are no joke. They're a serious challenge, and the final battle, it's epic and a great use of VR, and it certainly had a few holy shit moments in there. Enemy variety is a bit of a missed opportunity in Arken Age. Most of that variety comes from how armored an enemy is and what weapon they wield. The game world is rich and could certainly support a wider range of enemy types. If there's a sequel, I would love to see some less humanoid enemies, maybe some robotic animals, dogs, or hell, even flying creatures. More local wildlife would also help flesh out the world. And just imagine with the game's physics system, who wouldn't want to piss off some kind of like alien rhino, sending it into a rage, tossing robots around just because I shot it. The game is broken up into 15 or 16 levels that feel semi-open world, and you're free to teleport back to previously visited stages, and sometimes the game requires you to do so. Each level is designed like a mini open world. The levels feel both large and small at the same time. You can quickly get from one end to the other, but they're just brimming with things to discover. And a big part of that exploration involves climbing, which is made seamless by the game's sleek pickaxe system. These tools shoot out of your wrist and allow you to climb anything made of wood, and I mean anything. It's a joy to scale the walls, trees, and structures as you uncover hidden areas and secrets. And if there's a building, there's probably a way inside, if you can figure it out. I found myself just completely engrossed in exploring these levels, and the game rewards your curiosity. To find all the weapon schematics, you'll need to dig into every nook and cranny. Along the way, you also discover some cleverly designed crafting stations, each featuring well thought out VR mechanics. Take this health syringe maker, for example. It's a small but satisfying interaction that feels right at home in VR. Beyond the blueprints, you also collect scrap materials that can be refined into cash. And everything in Arken Age is just easy to pick up and interact with. There's no awkward fumbling around with objects in this game. It's very well thought out. Outside of the main story, Arken Age offers secondary objectives and hidden collectible relics. These green pyramids are cleverly hidden throughout the levels and often feel like puzzles in their own right. Uncovering them requires creative thinking, and I found the challenge of hunting them to be genuinely rewarding and enjoyable. Each pyramid reveals a bit of lore, and breaking a certain number of them is required to unlock certain doors containing powerful weapon schematics, and trust me, you're going to want these blueprints. To make the search easier, you can track down cartographers and absorb their essence, which grants you a compass pointing to the relic's location. You also encounter enslaved Nara, who offer a meaningful choice. Take the money they give you, keeping their soul enslaved, or destroy their helmets to set them free. Your decisions matter, as the game tracks how often you free them and rewards you later at the Nara camp.
My brothers and sister, Lord Zion.
And hopefully you are beginning to see that Arken Age just offers a lot of combat, a lot of exploration, and a lot to do. This is a very well-rounded experience. The secondary objectives, they are a little basic. They are secondary objectives and not side quests. Most of them involve finding something or killing something specific. However, that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy them. Some of them are more creative than others, but oftentimes they lean into the game's puzzle-like nature. In fact, Arken Age at times feels like a platformer that is just taunting you with something just out of reach, and you kind of feel that itch to collect everything. Arken Age also does the difficulty settings right. Heroic not only changes enemy health and damage, but also their melee attack speed, bullet velocity, bullet DPS, your health syringe creation amounts, your ammo availability, and just the cost of in-game items in general. This is so much better than just making the player weaker and the enemies stronger. And when starting a new game plus, that difficulty ramps up even further. Enemies hit harder, items cost more, but you'll carry over all the weapons you unlocked previously. And it's incredibly satisfying to tear through unarmored enemies with late game weapons. There's also a terminal you'll find in the early stages that houses an arena mode. If you ever just feel like shredding some metal, this terminal lets you dive right in. And back in the early days of VR, this is an entire game built around this console. But in Arken Age, it's just a fun bonus that showcases how far VR has come. Okay, so on to the negatives. There really aren't many that we haven't already touched on, but some enemies do respawn after a time, and I did find this a little annoying, especially when going back and trying to 100% an area. All I needed to do was just find that last relic, but I had to clear the level again. Also, the health syringe system might be a tad overpowered, especially late game. By that time, if you scoured the levels like I did, you had plenty of resources to just stock up on them. They're near instant full health and they don't have a cooldown, but I did play on normal difficulty after all. And I have passed this feedback on to the developers, so maybe by the time you're watching this, those minor gripes I had with the game won't be a thing at all. Arken Age is a complete, polished, and remarkably well-rounded game. It's packed with meaningful combat, stunning environments, and a lengthy story campaign, and actual endgame content. And as I said in the intro, this is one of the best AA VR games to date. And when I reached the credits, I was utterly blown away. Not just by the cool 3D VR presentation, but by the revelation that this 15-hour epic, brimming with content, creativity, and handcrafted details, was made by only 4 people. 4. I was so amazed that I immediately went into chatting it up on their Discord to confirm it, and sure enough, I was chatting with half their company in that conversation. Arken Age stands as one of the most polished VR games I've ever played, easily putting some big budget studio efforts to shame. 4 developers over 4 years created this sci-fi fantasy epic, and it shows just how much passion and skill can accomplish. Developers like Vitruvius VR remind me why I started my channel in the first place, to highlight the people and games pushing VR forward and raising the bar for what's possible. Is it perfect? Of course not, but I would love to see this game grow into a series that becomes a cornerstone of VR. And if this team grows, it's scary to think what they could accomplish with more than 4 people. And I clearly highly recommend Arken Age to anyone interested in it. It's well worth the asking price and ready for a day one purchase. And that's it, everyone. I hope you found this review helpful and enjoyable. If you did, sound off in the comments. And if you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing. Thanks, and catch you next time.